Hello there, my sleepy fellows. Tonight, we wander into a realm both ancient and hidden, a place tucked beneath the skin of Skyrim itself, a world bathed in dim light and silence, where secrets sleep beneath stone and glowing moss. If you enjoy these peaceful journeys through Skyrim's hidden heart, please support the channel by liking the video, subscribing, or sharing your thoughts below. Your kindness keeps these stories alive and ensures more tales from Tamriel will find their way to you. Tonight, our journey takes us far below the surface to Blackreach, that vast cavern of wonders where sky and earth blur and history lingers in every shadow. Long have scholars pondered its mysteries, and adventurers dared its depths, but even those bold souls have only glimpsed a fraction of its truth. For beneath Blackreach's great glowing domes and towering Dwemer ruins lies something older, something quiet and small, yet filled with meaning. A candle, the last candle, still flickering deep within a forgotten hall where no living soul has passed in centuries. What light could endure so long in darkness? What memory clings to the air so strongly that even time itself cannot snuff it out? This is the story we follow tonight, a gentle unraveling of the past, led by a traveler who walks not in search of treasure or glory, but simply to understand. In the stillness of Blackreach, we will walk beside them through ancient halls and bioluminescent glades until we find the last candle's glow and the story it has kept safe. Now, breathe deeply. The earth beneath Skyrim calls to us. Let us follow its voice into the quiet glow of Blackreach. The story begins with Eryndil, a quiet wanderer whose steps have traced the forgotten edges of Skyrim for many years. Neither hero nor outlaw, Eryndil walks the world as an observer, drawn not to fame or fortune, but to the quiet places where history lingers in silence. He is a child of two worlds, born in Winterhold to a Breton mother and a Dwemer father, raised with stories from both cultures, half belonging to each, yet fully accepted by neither. It was this sense of standing between worlds that first led Eryndil into the wilds. From the cliffs of the Sea of Ghosts to the ancient barrows hidden deep in the Reach, he wandered with no clear destination, seeking only to see, to listen, to understand. For while the College of Winterhold offered books filled with knowledge, Eryndil had always believed that the land itself held stories no scholar could write. One evening, while camped near the ruins of Alftand, the chill air thick with the hum of distant Dwemer machinery, a strange vision stirred in his dreams. He saw a candle burning in utter darkness, its flame impossibly bright against the void. Around it, shadows moved, not menacing, but curious, as though drawn by the light. The vision carried no words, only a feeling, something between longing and invitation. When Eryndil woke, the vision lingered like frost clinging to skin, refusing to fade with the morning light. As a scholar of ancient lore, he knew the legends of Blackreach, the great subterranean expanse hidden beneath Skyrim's skin. Its bioluminescent caverns and towering Dwemer ruins had fascinated him for years, though no tale spoke of a solitary candle. Still, The call was undeniable. There was something waiting deep beneath the earth, something small, fragile, yet carrying a weight that could not be ignored. For Eryndil, this was not a quest for gold or power. It was a pilgrimage, a chance to stand at the edge of forgotten memory and bear witness to a story no bard would ever sing. He packed lightly, just a journal, a lantern, a few days' rations, and a collection of old Dwemer maps worn thin from study and handling. He would follow the path through Alftand, descending into the ancient lift that led into Blackreach itself. But this time, unlike the treasure hunters and mages who came before, Eryndil carried no greed, no hunger for secrets to claim. He would walk gently, with the heart of a listener, ready to receive whatever story the earth chose to share. For in the end, he believed what so few remembered, that even the smallest light can hold the greatest truth, if only someone remembers to see it. Eryndil stood at the mouth of Alftand, where ancient Dwemer stone met the ice-bitten winds of Skyrim's north. Snow had drifted into the cracks between great metallic doors, their once bright brass dulled to a tarnished green. Above, the sky stretched wide and pale, streaked with the faintest glow of early dawn. Behind him, the wind sighed through the mountains, but ahead lay silence, a silence that had endured for centuries beneath the earth. The great Dwemer lift, framed in frost and ice, descended into darkness. Its gears groaned to life beneath Eryndil's hand, reluctant to awaken after such long sleep. As the platform lowered, the cold mountain air gave way to damp stone and metallic echoes, the soft hiss of steam drifting up like breath from the earth itself. This was the first threshold, leaving the world of sky and stars behind, stepping into the forgotten veins beneath Skyrim's skin. The deeper the lift sank, the darker the shaft became, until at last, a soft blue glow blossomed below, shimmering like starlight spilled across the cavern floor. The ceiling opened wide, revealing the first glimpse of Blackreach, a world unto itself, vast and still and beautiful. Eryndil stepped off the platform onto solid ground, and for a moment he simply stood and looked. It was one thing to read of Blackreach, to pore over fragmented maps and the hurried notes of adventurers too frightened to stay long. But to stand here, beneath that impossible sky of reek and light, was something else entirely. Towering glowing mushrooms swayed faintly in the still air, their bioluminescent caps casting gentle green and blue light across the cavern floor. Some rose taller than trees, their stalks wide as ancient oaks, while others clustered low, forming carpets of faintly glowing moss along the edges of black stone rivers. Pools of phosphorescent water glimmered in hollows where the cavern floor had settled, their surfaces smooth as glass. The air was thick, but not unpleasant. Warm in places where unseen Dwemer mechanisms still hummed faintly, sending small bursts of steam curling toward the ceiling. And within that warmth, Eryndil could feel the weight of time itself, as if the earth held its breath, waiting to be remembered. He began walking, footsteps soft against stone and moss. Though the Dwemer ruins loomed large around him, with their towering metal arches and silent, rusted sentinels, it was the land itself that spoke the loudest. Somewhere beneath his feet, water ran through unseen channels, the lifeblood of Blackreach still flowing after all these years. It was a world sustained by silence, untouched by the chaos of the surface. No wars, no kings, no songs of glory, only the quiet persistence of memory etched into every stone. He passed through an ancient Dwemer plaza, its fountains long dry, the statues of metal-clad Mer still standing guard, though their faces had eroded into smoothness. Strange glyphs and runes adorned the walls, some carved by Dwemer hands, others newer, rougher, perhaps left by adventurers who sought fortune in these depths. But Eryndil was not here for gold or relics. His path led toward the heart of the cavern, where the vision had called him, the place where the last candle still burned. His fingers traced the edges of his journal, where he had sketched the dream again and again, the flickering light, the shadows leaning close, the sense of something waiting to be known. The deeper he walked, the quieter Blackreach became. Even the soft hum of Dwemer machines faded, until all that remained was the sound of his own breath and the faint trickle of water somewhere far below. He passed a grove of glowing mushrooms so densely packed they formed a tunnel of light, their stalks leaning inward like ancient trees breezing overhead. The ground beneath them was soft, covered in a carpet of moss that shimmered faintly beneath his boots. Beyond the grove lay a small lake, its surface so still it reflected the cavern ceiling perfectly, like a second sky inverted beneath his feet. Eryndil knelt at the water's edge, watching his reflection ripple with each breath. The lake seemed to hum, not a sound, but a feeling, as though something beneath its surface remembered every soul that had passed this way. He continued onward, guided not by map or logic, but by the faint pull of intuition, the quiet voice that had always led him to stories hidden beneath stone and snow. The terrain shifted subtly as he walked. The smooth cavern floor gave way to worn stone steps, their edges rounded by age. They descended into a narrow ravine where the glow of mushrooms was replaced by something softer, a pale, flickering light. Eryndil's breath caught. The candle. It sat on a small stone altar, tucked into a natural alcove where the rock curved inward like a cupped hand. The flame was small, almost fragile, yet it burned steadily, despite the still air. Its light was neither Dwemer nor natural, but something older, a light that seemed to belong not to the present, but to memory itself. He stepped closer, his shadow leaning long across the stone, drawn toward the candle like the figures in his dream. Around the altar, the stone was carved with symbols not of Dwemer origin, but something Nordic, older than the ruins above, worn almost to invisibility. The air felt warm, though no source of heat could be seen. Eryndil knelt before the candle, feeling its glow touch his face. There was a presence here, not a spirit, but the weight of memory, layered thick like frost upon stone. He opened his journal, hands trembling slightly as he sketched the altar, the flame, the carvings. Each line felt like a conversation with the past, a dialogue between the living and the remembered. The flame flickered, and for a moment, Eryndil could swear he saw faces within it. A young woman with braids of silver hair, a weathered Nord hunter with a soft smile, an old scholar with ink-stained fingers and eyes full of wonder. None spoke, but their presence was enough. They had once stood here, just as he did now, drawn by the same light, the same unspoken call to remember. As the moment passed, the candle's flame steadied once more, its message clear. This was not a place to claim or conquer. It was a place to witness, to see, to honor, and to carry its story forward. Eryndil sat beside the altar, letting the stillness settle around him. The silence was not empty, but full of lives once lived, moments once cherished, all gathered here beneath the earth. The last candle in Blackreach still burned, not to light the way for the living, but to illuminate the lives of those who had walked this path before. With the flicker of that gentle flame reflected in his eyes, Eryndil knew his journey was only beginning. He would listen, he would remember, and in time he would share this story, so the light would never fade, and Blackreach, that vast and silent world beneath the earth, would never be truly forgotten. Eryndil sat beside the altar, the flickering candle casting soft, dancing shadows across the ancient stone. The silence of Blackreach felt alive in this place, not heavy or ominous, but full, layered with whispers of 1,000 unseen moments that had passed here long before his own footsteps arrived. This was not simply a shrine or relic. This candle was a sentinel of memory, guarding something far older than the Dwemer stonework surrounding it. He leaned closer, examining the symbols carved into the altar's edges. They were Nordic, but they bore none of the usual bravado of conquest or worship. These were softer symbols, speaking not of power, but of remembrance, swirls and spirals folded into one another, resembling the gentle current of water or the twisting flow of wind through a canyon. Among the symbols was a repeated motif, a flame held within cupped hands. Each carving was unique, some hands rough and strong, others delicate and slender, but the flame was always the same, steady and bright, unmoving despite the hands that held it. Eryndil's fingers traced the grooves, feeling the worn stone beneath his touch. It was a ritualistic movement, almost reverent, as though touching the carvings placed him in silent conversation with those who had once stood here centuries before. The candle itself was strange, not wax, nor tallow, nor any material he could recognize. Its surface shimmered faintly, as if infused with something between fire and starlight, and yet it gave off no heat. Its light was soft, barely illuminating more than the immediate circle around the altar. But that light held weight. It seemed to anchor the space itself, keeping this small pocket of Blackreach outside the reach of time. As Eryndil's gaze drifted up, the cavern above seemed to respond. The bioluminescent mushrooms swayed gently, despite the still air, and faint glimmers of light moved through the moss, like fireflies swimming through mist. This place was alive in its own way, not with breath, but with memory itself. He opened his journal, sketching the candle and its surrounding carvings. Every line he drew felt like translation, turning silence into shape, mystery into meaning. As his pencil moved across the page, his thoughts wandered back to the vision that led him here. The flickering flame, the figures leaning close to it, the sense of longing and quiet reverence. They hadn't been ghosts in the sense of restless spirits. No, these were something gentler, echoes of lives that had simply wanted to be remembered. Suddenly, the candle's flame flickered sharply, its glow stretching outward for a brief moment. The air grew warmer, and the walls of the alcove shimmered faintly. Eryndil stood quickly, heart steady but breath held, as the first vision bloomed around him. The altar faded, replaced by the image of a young Nord woman, her hands cupped around a small flame, identical to the candle before him. She stood where he stood now, her expression calm and resolute, as though she had come here to make an offering. Behind her, a small procession of villagers stood in silence, each holding a similar flame, a ritual of remembrance, passing light from hand to hand. Eryndil blinked, and the vision shifted. The woman knelt, placing her flame upon the altar, and the light merged with the stone, becoming part of the candle itself. The others followed, each adding their light, layer upon layer of memory, until the final figure, an elderly man with hands trembling from age, placed the last flame. With his offering made, the old man spoke, not aloud, but into the air itself, his voice becoming part of the very stone. Though Eryndil could not hear the words, he understood their meaning. Let no life pass unremembered. Let no story fade without witness. The vision dissolved, leaving Eryndil standing alone once more, the candle's flame now steady and still. He released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. This was the heart of the mystery, the reason the candle endured when the world above forgot. This place was a sanctuary of memory, created not by the Dwemer, but by the people who lived before them, the ancient Nords, who knew that the greatest tragedy was not death itself, but to be forgotten by the land they had once called home. The symbols on the altar were a language of remembrance, a contract between the living and the earth itself. The candle was not a magical artifact in the way mages might think of it. It was a vessel for memory, holding the light of lives long past, lives that had faded from history's pages, but not from the heart of Skyrim. As Eryndil knelt once more before the altar, he understood why the vision had called him here. It was not to claim the candle or to unlock its power. It was to witness it, to ensure that even in this age of steel and spell, someone still remembered the promise made so long ago. He touched the stone again, fingers lingering on the carving of the hands holding flame, and once more the air shifted. A second vision rose, not of ceremony, but of everyday moments, the sort of quiet life that never makes it into history books. A mother braiding her daughter's hair by firelight, a hunter teaching his son to carve an arrow, an elder singing a soft lullaby to a child too young to understand the words. Each image flickered past like leaves carried downstream, brief and fleeting, yet full of meaning. These were the memories the candle protected, not the great deeds of warriors or kings, but the small, everyday moments that made life whole. Eryndil felt a warmth in his chest, not from magic, but from understanding. The stories held here were not meant to change the world. They were meant to preserve what made it worth saving. With gentle hands, he opened his journal again, not to map or record facts, but to write what he felt, the quiet awe of standing in a place where memory itself lived. "This is not a tomb," he wrote. "It is a hearth, and in every life that passed through these halls has left its warmth behind." As the candle flickered again, a single drop of light separated from its flame, drifting into the air before settling gently into the pages of his journal. Eryndil smiled softly, knowing the candle had offered him a gift, a fragment of memory to carry forward, ensuring that the promise endures. In the stillness, he could almost hear the ancient voice again. "Let no life pass unremembered. Let no story fade without witness." Eryndil closed his journal and sat quietly beside the altar. No words were needed now. He had discovered what he came to find, not an artifact or a treasure, but a truth. That sometimes the greatest light is the one that asks only to be seen. And so, beneath the endless glow of Blackreach, Eryndil kept watch, adding his own presence to the long line of witnesses, ensuring that the last candle and all it remembered would never fade into darkness. Eryndil sat in silence, the candle's flame reflecting softly in his eyes. It was not the brilliance of magical power, nor the haunting flicker of a ghostly haunt. It was gentler, a light born from remembrance itself, the gathered warmth of countless lives who had passed through this very place. The air was still, but in that stillness, he could feel the weight of time, not oppressive but present, like the quiet hum beneath a song's melody. He had come to Blackreach thinking the candle was a relic, perhaps something tied to the ancient magic of the Dwemer, or a remnant of a lost magical experiment. But the truth was far more profound. This candle was not a tool, nor a ward, nor a secret waiting to be unlocked. It was a promise, made long ago and quietly kept, flickering even as centuries slipped by unnoticed. Eryndil rose to his feet, feeling a kind of reverence settle over him. This was no discovery to claim or write into books. It was not a secret to expose to curious scholars back at the college. This was a vigil, a responsibility passed from hand to hand, generation after generation, a quiet vow that no life would vanish entirely into the dark. As he stood, the candle flickered once more, and the air thickened with memory. Shapes began to emerge, not solid, but impressions, like reflections caught in water. They formed a circle around the altar, figures in simple clothing, their hands cupped as if still holding the flames they once carried. They were the keepers, the ones who had come before, adding their light to the candle across the centuries. Their faces were calm, not mournful, not pleading, but at peace, content that someone had come to see what they had left behind. Their work was not in vain. Eryndil bowed his head slightly, acknowledging their presence. As he did, the candle brightened, its glow extending outward until it touched each of the spectral figures. One by one, their forms dissolved into the light, merging once more with the memory they had entrusted to this place. And then the light spoke, not in words, but in feeling, a message not for his ears, but for his heart. "Will you carry the light forward?" Eryndil understood immediately. This was the final step. The candle had endured for countless years, but all things in this world, even memory, must eventually pass into the hands of the living. The ancient villagers were gone, their duty fulfilled, and now the flame needed a new keeper. With a deep breath, Eryndil knelt before the altar. He removed his own small lantern from his pack, the same lantern that had lit his way through caves and forests across Skyrim, always in search of stories. Now, it would become part of one. He held the lantern close to the flame, and as if recognizing his intent, the candle leaned toward him, its light stretching into the glass of his lantern. The wick caught fire, not with ordinary flame, but with the soft glow of memory itself, tinged with hues of gold and silver, like starlight drifting through water. For a moment, the altar sat empty. The candle's original flame had vanished, its purpose fulfilled, but Eryndil's lantern now carried that same warmth, transformed but unbroken, passed into his care. He stood, lantern cradled gently in his hands, and for the first time, the carvings along the altar changed. New lines etched themselves into the stone, fresh and clear, his name alongside the countless others who had carried the light before him. Eryndil of Winterhold, keeper of the last candle. The cavern around him breathed, as though relieved. The moss glowed brighter, the water in the distant pools shimmered, and even the great mushrooms overhead seemed to sway with greater ease. Blackreach itself had witnessed the vow. The land now knew that the memory would not fade. He could have remained there for hours, for days, simply soaking in the quiet peace of it all. But the candle's lesson was clear. Memory must move. To keep a story alive, it must walk the world again. With careful steps, Eryndil left the altar and began the slow journey back toward the surface. His lantern glowed softly at his side, illuminating the ancient stone paths and reflecting in the pools like a second moon. As he walked, the cavern responded. The quiet hum of unseen machines softened, as if even the remnants of the Dwemer understood the importance of what had just occurred. This was not a discovery for wealth or fame. It was a return, a gentle restoration of something too easily lost. Each step upward felt lighter, not because the path was easy, but because the burden had shifted from being a seeker to being a bearer. Eryndil was no longer merely a traveler passing through Blackreach. He was part of its story now, woven into the same thread as those who had come before. At the threshold where Blackreach opened once more into the cold stone shaft leading to the surface, Eryndil paused. He turned one last time to gaze at the glowing cavern, its gentle light stretching far beyond his sight. This was a world that would never make it into grand legends or bardic songs, but it was no less important. Because what makes a place sacred is not its fame, but the memories it protects. Eryndil placed his hand briefly on the stone wall, a quiet farewell and a quiet promise all at once. Then he stepped onto the lift, the gears grinding softly to life, carrying him upward into the cold air above. As he emerged into the Skyrim night, his lantern still glowed faintly, its light softer than the stars, but warmer than the cold mountain air. The sky stretched wide above him, but Eryndil knew now that the sky was only half the story. Beneath the earth, in the quiet heart of Blackreach, the last candle still flickered, not alone anymore, but carried forward by a new hand, a new voice, a new promise. The journey had brought him down into the earth, but the true path lay ahead, out into the world, where stories waited to be gathered like fallen leaves and carried on into the lantern's gentle light. Eryndil began to walk, the path open before him, and the candle's flame walked with him. No life unremembered, no story left untold, not while the last candle still glowed. The cold air wrapped around Eryndil's shoulders like an old cloak as he stepped onto the snowy ridge above Alftand. The sky stretched endlessly overhead, clear and bright, with the stars still shimmering despite the first blush of dawn rising over the eastern peaks. His lantern swung gently at his side, its soft glow almost invisible beneath the wide sky, but he knew the light it held was no ordinary flame. For all the wonders Blackreach had offered, its glowing caverns, its ancient ruins, its soft humming machines, it was this light, the memory carried within his lantern, that held the greatest treasure of all. It was not treasure that could be spent, nor knowledge that could be traded for influence. It was something quieter, something that only grew stronger when passed from hand to hand, heart to heart. Eryndil stood at the edge of the ridge, looking out across the vastness of Skyrim. The land below stretched far and wide, forests, rivers, winding trails that disappeared into mist and shadow. The world felt vast, filled with untold stories, each path holding memories of lives lived and lost. He thought of the ancient villagers who had walked that same land long before him. Their footsteps were long erased by time, their names forgotten by history. Yet they endured, in the warmth of a shared meal, in the hush of snow falling over a sleeping village, in the quiet songs sung beside the hearth. Moments too small for history books, but too precious for the earth to forget. That was the truth the candle had guarded. It was not a beacon to guide heroes, nor a weapon to shape wars. It was a vessel for the smallest lights, the tenderest, most fragile moments that define what it means to live. Eryndil smiled softly, feeling the weight of the lantern in his hand, not heavy with burden, but comforting, like a hand placed gently on his shoulder. He was no longer merely a wanderer or scholar. He was a keeper of light, entrusted with stories too quiet for legends, but too important to lose. The wind stirred around him, carrying the scent of pine and frost, and with it, he imagined the voices of those who had stood vigil before him. Not loud, not even words, just the sense of presence, a quiet reassurance that he was not alone in this task. As the sky brightened further, Maser and Secunda began to fade, their silver glow swallowed by the morning light. The world awakened, birds stirring in the branches, distant wolves calling across the valley, the rustling of leaves carried on the breeze. Life continued, as it always did, unaware of the ancient memory now cradled in a single traveler's hand. And yet, Eryndil knew, the land knew. Every step he took, every stray he gathered in his travels would add to the light he carried. And one day, when his own time ended, he would pass the lantern to another hand, a new keeper, someone who would sit beside the candle's glow and understand that memory is not a thing to hoard, but to carry and to share. He imagined that moment, far in the future, when his mace would be carved into the altar beside all the others. Not a mark of glory, but a quiet acknowledgement. He was here. He listened. He remembered. With a deep breath, Eryndil turned from the ridge and began his descent into the forests below. The snow crunched beneath his boots, the wind weaving between the trees like a gentle voice. His path was his own, but the light of the candle walked with him, illuminating not just the trail ahead, but the lives that had come before. As he walked, he thought of the countless small stories that now lived within the flame. A mother braiding her daughter's hair beside a hearth, a hunter carving an arrow while sunlight dappled the forest floor, an elder humming a lullaby to a child who would never remember the words, but would carry the warmth of that melody forever. These were not the stories of kings or champions. They were the stories that made life whole. And now, through Eryndil, they would walk the world again, their light flickering softly in his lantern, waiting to be noticed by anyone willing to pause, to listen, to remember. The land stretched wide before him, endless and filled with possibility. But Eryndil knew this much: wherever his path led next, the candle's light would follow. And so, beneath the clear sky and the warming sun, a lone traveler walked into the heart of Skyrim, his lantern glowing softly, a reminder that even in the vast sweep of history, no life is too small, no memory too fleeting to be held in the gentle light of remembrance. In the end, the last candle in Blackreach was never meant to stay hidden. It was meant to be carried, to walk beside the living, ensuring that no matter how much time passed, some part of every story would remain, softly flickering forever. And so Eryndil walked on, a quiet keeper of light, guarding the memories that make Tamriel whole. Eryndil's footsteps faded into the hush of the waking world. The last remnants of Blackreach's glow still lingered in his lantern, a gentle pulse of light barely visible beneath the first golden rays of dawn. The transition from the deep, hushed stillness of the cavern to the crisp, open air of Skyrim's frozen peaks was subtle yet profound, like stepping from one dream into another. The air carried the scent of pine and fresh snow, a sharp contrast to the damp, metallic stillness of the underground city. A soft wind stirred the treetops, sending a whisper through the boughs of ancient spruces. Their needles, dusted with frost, shimmered faintly as the light touched them, casting thin shadows that stretched along the mountain's edge. Somewhere in the distance, a stream flowed beneath a thin sheet of ice, its quiet bubbling blending with the occasional creak of tree branches swaying in the wind. The world was waking slowly, peacefully, as if reluctant to break the spell of the night. Further down the ridge, the sound of wings fluttering against the morning air caught Eryndil's attention. A small flock of snow thrushes rose from the trees, their dark silhouettes dancing against the pale sky. Their soft calls echoed briefly before fading into the vast expanse beyond. The lantern in his hand flickered, not fading, but adjusting, its glow now softer, blending with the light of day. It was no longer the lone illumination in a world of shadow, but a quiet companion to the rising sun. Memory had joined the present, no longer separate, but part of the rhythm of the land itself. Eryndil paused at a clearing where the frost-covered grass swayed gently in the cold breeze. The land stretched before him, rolling hills covered in morning mist, forests veiled in silver frost, and beyond them, the vast, endless sky. Here, the world was still. No voices, no crowds, only the breathing of the earth and the distant sigh of the wind. The lantern's glow steadied, and with it, a feeling of quiet fulfillment settled over the land. No longer was this place just a path on a map, a forgotten corner of Tamriel. It had been seen, understood, and carried forward for a long moment. Nothing moved, nothing stirred, as if the world itself had paused to listen, to hold on to the remnants of the journey before letting them drift softly into the vastness of time. Then the wind picked up again, carrying the scent of distant rain, rustling the trees in a slow, rhythmic dance. The stream hummed its quiet melody, the birds continued their flight, and the day gently unfolded piece by piece. And so, with the whisper of the wind and the hush of the world around him, Eryndil took another step forward, his lantern's glow a quiet echo of the light that would never truly fade. Blackreach was behind him, but its memory walked with him still.